Okay. Well, greetings. Lonny Jarrett here with Heiner Fruehauf, Lorie Eve Dechar, Alexandra Love, Randine Lewis, William Morris, and Brandt Stickley. And we've been meeting once a month for a year in what we've been calling an Integral Chinese Medicine Collective, and just really looking into things in an intersubjective context in a very free way with each other about Chinese medicine, the practice of medicine, our interests in it. By integral in a general definition here, what we're really thinking is of a medicine that leaves no part of the self behind, no significant part of the self behind, and that self includes the entire inner sphere of what it means to be a human being, as well as the biosphere, the social sphere, all the way up to the cosmosphere. So looking at the human being as an integral representation of the inner and outer dimension of existence. And so anything's on the table to look at. And we've been, as I said, we've been meeting for a year. And we thought we'd start having discussions and put them out for the profession to be able to hear and eventually to participate in by way of asking questions or participate in through comments and sharing what your experience is. And this is really our first introductory talk. And what we thought we'd look into tonight is just the question, very simply, of why Chinese medicine now? So we all have all of us have decades of practice and involvement in the medicine. We're all senior practitioners. We've all taught extensively, written to various degrees, made various contributions, and are all moved by the medicine, and still after all these decades interested in and extremely moved by it and its potential. And so we thought we'd just look into, for each of us and intersubjectively, why Chinese medicine now? I've been asking for many years, what is the relevance of treating Mr. or Mrs. Jones for their back pain when their species is threatened with extinction? So when I say what's the relevance, that isn't to infer that I don't think it's relevant. I think it has great relevance, but the question is, what is the relevant? How is the individual a portal into consciousness, into culture, into the biosphere? Certainly, historically, classically, the Chinese saw the human being as a microcosm of the universe, of the biosphere. They mapped the social network onto human beings with many of the points they chose on the meridians are locations of actual places in China, or structures in the government, which also represent structures in consciousness. So just with that introduction of the hope of and the striving toward a medicine that leaves no significant part of the self behind, why Chinese medicine now?
Thanks for the introduction, Lonnie. And the first thing that comes to mind as you're speaking.
You need to speak up a little, Alexander.
The first thing that comes to mind as you're speaking is this sort of implicit embeddedness that Chinese medicine understands that we are as individuals, we are embedded in our environment, and that what's going on in government, what's going on in nature, and what's going on in us is really a larger dynamic unfolding, which seems to me that when we then look, therefore, when we look out into the world, when we look interior to ourselves and we find stagnation, we find suffering, we find fragmentation, it seems that this medicine has the potential of making an impact and placing its heart on that pulse that's both ringing inside of us, but also in the inseparable dimensions of the world that we are inhabiting.
I like the word embeddedness because I find one of the biggest problems of our time, at least as I am seeing it in my limited orbit of being with patients and students, is that we are at a time when we are supposedly more embedded through technological connection. Everybody feels more alone and disconnected from nature as well as everybody else. And I find that in the Chinese pre-medical classics, as well as in the classics themselves, but also in the practice of the medicine, it's all about natural connection. And that's what drives my love for this medicine, is this radical commitment toward protecting nature, understanding nature, and deeply respecting the natural connectivity in there. I started out as a literature student in the 1980s after graduating from high school, and you read at the time I was living in Germany, reading the German Romantics and Goethe, and it was all about this indulgence in nature and writing poetically about the connection that one feels and then expresses in one's art. And then you come to modern and postmodern writing, then you write about how the moon hangs like a neon light in the sky. So in comparing natural phenomena because the unnatural kind of artifice is more natural to modern city dwellers, certainly now more than ever, than the natural world. And I know I bring teenagers to the beach or so, and they can't fathom the idea to walk barefoot on the beach and feel that connectivity, as if you, particularly on the wet sand, and you absorbing all of this energy that comes from the millions of lightning strikes that hit the crust of the earth every single day. And so over my bed at home hangs this calligraphy that somebody gave me at some point, Dao Fa Ziran, the Tao follows nature. And that's, of course, in the Tao Te Ching, preceded by human beings. Yes, we are material. We follow the laws of the earth, but the earth follows heaven, which means there's also this unfathomably unlimited and vast dimension of space and energy. But that's not finished. That heavens follows the Tao, which means that energy is intelligent. And then Dao Fa Ziran, the Tao just follows nature. So in a certain way, it's this highest instance, and the word nature means that which is just self-so. So that which you shouldn't be messing with. And that's precisely what we do as modern people, including students and teachers at the university where I teach, where you think this is the bastion of natural thinking in the Western world. You have this, people get anxious when you separate them from their phone. They think it's irresponsible when you have an infection, you not immediately run to the emergency room and pump yourself full of antibiotics, or, so there is just this sort of a ever accelerating shift in consciousness that's completely different even from my grandfather's generation, who was an MD, but he believed that you x-ray somebody 300 years later, your descendants are still going to be negatively affected by that. So that is what keeps me grounded in the medicine, as it's becoming more and more anachronistic to believe in nature and the self-organizing powers of it. There is this wisdom emanating from the ancient text. And then, of course, Chinese medicine is a system science. So you not only have this chaotic energy out there, but it's everything is working as one. This conviction that all nervous system, digestive system, hormonal system, respiratory system all works as well, as one. And looking at agriculture and what we're doing wrong there, how we build our houses and what we're doing wrong there, and the crisis in medicine, they are all parallel. And you need, like, from a modern perspective, so many different experts to chime in here. Whereas from a Chinese medicine system science perspective, you have like this way of fathoming all the problems and potential solutions all at the same time. So for me, Chinese medicine, as Lonny was putting there, it's yes, we're treating maybe somebody's back pain, but you always it comes from a place that's so much more than that. And even if that doesn't get discussed with the patient at that time, we're not following some rote cookbook recipe there, but this whole philosophical and cosmological background that's also poetic is always humming in the background. So I always feel that's me personally, is I'm filled by that, and I find that never makes the practice of the medicine boring, nor the teaching.
I want to amplify your articulation of the self-organizing quality of Ziran, the aspect of Ziran, which is the self-organizing and spontaneous quality of nature, and bring that back into conversation with Lonnie's assertion that we're leaving nothing behind. And when we're in that moment of addressing even the back pain, we're bringing into being, we can start to see that the meaning of embeddedness and the meaning of self-organizing and auto-poetic generation is something that's emerging, billowing out through us and through the resonance and through the quality of connection that comes through that process of meeting in nature, regardless of whether there's artificial constructs around us. That point of meeting is always a point at which nature emerges, like stepping on, touching the water and watching the ripple go across it. And so if we're leaving no part of the self behind, and we're leaving no part of the consciousness that erupts from that meeting, it seems to me that that's the quality that ultimately is precisely what we need to counteract the very kind of weight of those artificial, overly organized, totalizing schemes of organization.
Just as an interjection, Brandt, I love the notion of maybe translating Ziran as autopoiesis.
Or even more so, beyond autopoiesis, we could borrow a term from Donna Haraway and refer to Simpoesis.
Thank you for bringing that in, Brandt. It was sitting right there, Simpoesis, because I do feel that that's the invitation to even go beyond that auto-poetic impulse and to realize that what we're working with as the implicit sort of undertone here is that it is Simpoesis. We enter into this reciprocal embeddedness with not just the earth, but the cosmos. I mean, we are inserting the needle as if we are bringing the North Star into connection with the deepest part of the planet each time we needle a point. And I think that that's a really important piece for me, because, well, as I've had this discussion certainly with Lonnie and many times, that when I came into the medicine, the original impulse beyond just the poetry and the beauty of it was this sort of hunch that this medicine, in sort of messing with the Western mind, could function as a catalyst to the emergence of integrality. Because once a person comes in, thinking that their body is just this thing that needs to be fixed, and then has the experience of light moving through them, it sort of breaks up, as you said, it's the beginning of the breakup of what we think reality is. And that was really what pulled me into it. And it is still, like when we say, why Chinese medicine now? It's still, that's what it is for me, is this catalyzing of, as Lonnie, you started us off, it's catalyzing an integral eruption. And just to kind of shorthand what that looks like, it's re-falling in love with matter. It's honoring matter, not as a thing, but as the place where Tao actually comes into being, where we can know the divine. And it is Simpoetic. It's happening. It's not just in me. It as it happens in me, it's happening out there. And perhaps that's the one thing I could say. Why do we go into the room and treat one person when the whole world is in suffering and disintegration? And if we, I sit with, and I come back to the faith that in this healing of the one, we're healing of the many, which is in a sense an integral idea.
Yeah. Beautiful. That to me, it just says it all. It's that birthing of a new consciousness, right? Like right there in that potential, where right now we have such a hunger for something miraculous. We have such a hunger to return to whatever. We come from the Tao. We are the Tao. We return to the Tao. We birth the Tao. And to be reminded of that, no matter if there's back pain, if there's cancer, if there's chaos in the world, to be able to remind people of their origin, and reminding every single time somebody has that recognition where they know their vastness, they return to the origin, they know what they are, like that's the source of radical transformation that we can barely even touch unless we're rooted there, unless we know how to root ourselves in that nothingness as that needle goes into the empty point and a new potential is born.
That's fascinating, that radicality that you speak of, Randine, and that point of light that you spoke of, Lorie. The angle of the perspective, whether it's aperspectival or perspectival, however you label that shift in consciousness that allows us to see something from a different place, is the virtual moment of a transformation. And that is chi. That's a function of the vital life force that we engage with when contemplating, speaking, acting in the world and with our clients. That level of transformation derived of perspectival shift is also one engendered of coherence. That the systems perspectives that Heiner articulated are manifold within the individual and without the individual, and that the symbiosis that can take place within that process is one whereby the individual who becomes healed is a fractalated phenomena in the entirety of the cosmos, such that the presencing of heaven, human, and earth is so for heaven, human, and earth, and that we are a piece of that in action. And when that takes place, the world changes infinitesimally small. Just like the butterfly flapping its wings in Beijing causes a tornado in Connecticut, it's a seed of being presencing at the level of source and its emergence into creation that becomes an evolving expression of that creation as a healing potential for the individuals and for the entire universe in which they exist.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Will, and what everyone said. We began talking about, Heiner was talking about and emphasizing, how embedded we are. And what came to mind, Leon Hammer, Will's teacher and Brandt's teacher and my teacher, told me a story many years ago about how his father gave his grandfather a ride in the first car the family owned. And they were going down to a pond to go fishing about 12 miles an hour. And the grandfather said, stop. And he stopped the car and he said, his father said, what's wrong? He said, what's the rush? And it's interesting. I mean, one way to think about it is that humans are embedded and that we're distanced from nature. But we can also look at it from a non-dual perspective, which is that really we are nature and it's nature doing this. And that we're actually a form of matter, a sense organ for the process, for the Tao, or the process of cosmic evolution, or the creative impulse, consciousness itself, however we want to talk about this, that can actually stand back and say, whoa, what am I doing? What am I doing? And that's nature saying, what am I doing? So I had a patient a few weeks ago that I've been working very deeply with once a week for a couple of years. And when she first came in, she was just absolutely hysterical, upset, irrational, and constantly triggered. And we've done a lot of work, and she's been making, shadow resolution. And she's really not just waking up, but growing up. And at her last treatment, she came in and she said, look, as you know, Lonnie, she said, we've been doing deep work and I've been making great progress, but I've realized that doing all of this for myself so I can be better is never going to be a sufficient motivation for me to go all the way. That wanting to be better and wanting to be free of my neurosis and wanting to feel better and be happier has gotten me this far, but I've been realizing in the last little while that I need a motivation much bigger than just my own happiness. And that got us into a very deep conversation about, well, who are you? And how every time we make a choice to stand back from our conditioning as human beings and make a different choice, when we essentially take the perspective that this generational trauma, this karmic line ends with me. Mm-hmm. That I'm not responsible for having created it, but I'm responsible for the outcome right here and right now. not primarily so I can feel better, because actually to overcome this kind of conditioning is often difficult and challenging, and we can have all kinds of feelings and all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of experiences which are difficult, but that I actually owe my transformation from being a seeker to being a finder, to being somebody who's been sort of really focused on their own healing, to declaring myself whole. I owe this to everything and to everyone. Like I actually have a responsibility. This is not just about me feeling happier and better. This is about every interaction. No interaction with anyone is insignificant, and every interaction is an opportunity. And now that I've been overcoming my own triggers, I'm starting to see how much it's not about my suffering anymore, because I can see how much suffering there is. And I've actually learned enough and I'm getting free enough that I need a bigger motivation than just my own healing. And I think right there in that, we see a microcosm of the kind of shift that needs to happen on the planet. Now, if we stand any hope of coming together to overcome the dilemmas that face us, it is going to be, we are going to all have to self-author symbiotically together into a self beyond just our own individual neurosis and uncomfortabilities and our own special pet issues, and come together in just a much deeper way. And I just wanted to make a point. When Lorie was talking, Lorie said, well, when this happens in me, and I thought to myself, well, Lorie, it isn't happening. You're doing it. We're doing it. And yes, we can say we are nature, and thus nature is doing it, but it takes our active creative participation to make the kind of shift happen now that I think is the real potential of this medicine. So this medicine has always been that for me, is I recognized it 42 years ago when I took my first 10-week class in it. I said, this is the key. We're all implicated. We're all implicated. My wholeness is implicated. And it isn't separate from, there is no Tao out there that is more whole than the least whole of us.
Yeah, and I think for me, the key, one of the keys in what you're speaking to is this recognition that we are participatory beings, and if we're looking at a medicine that leaves no part of the self behind, then it brings up questions for me around, in what way am I participating, and with what am I participating? And in some of this sort of modern distancing ourselves from nature, there's also this gesture of distancing in general, in such a way that I begin to not only distance myself from you and distance myself from the beach, but I'm also distancing myself from the ways in which I feel fragmented, as well as the ways in which I am already whole. And to me, when I listen to you, Lonny, with this invitation of, well, what goes beyond my own focus on my own problems? And how might I enter the world and participate with it in a way where I am an unfolding expression of virtue? In order for me to do that, practically speaking, I would have to have some sort of intimacy with the places in myself that are covering this wholeness, sort of pretending that they are fragment. And what I find in the context of shadow resolution work, when I'm able to drop in and have intimate contact with the places who believe themselves to be fragment and honor them, seeing their intrinsic goodness, there's this automatic opening and a stepping aside and a reintegration so that we can live from virtue effortlessly. Of course, there are moments when we choose to live from virtue with willpower, and that goes great until we're tired or something becomes just too much. But with this invitation towards participating with all dimensions of the self and inviting this sort of kind of deep phenomenological intimacy and a commitment to contacting the wholeness even in the fragments and the contractions, I think it starts to create an environment where we are able to live as the heart of humanity as virtue in action and also as quality of being emanating from us. And to me, that is the essence of this medicine, that as we're placing that needle within that context of that profound emptiness that Randine was speaking to, there is a pluming of this virtue that we're contacting soul to soul. And that creates sort of a thunderous awakening within the us, where the practitioner and the client are in fact one.
You know, we've talked a lot about acupuncture, but I think we can't forget that herbal medicine is exactly the same. It's that same moment occurs precisely in the moment that the body's able to take in substance and extract the essences from that and then transform that back into our flesh. That moment's happening, as Lorie was saying, that immanence of that, not this transcendence out there. And you're describing as well, we reach to that peak longs to dive back into the depths. Its natural wholeness is expressed in its opening, emerging until it merges and becomes and dives back to its origin. And that's the lungs taking in their aspirations, the stomach with its appetites taking in its substance, both of which are different orientations of metal, a 5-phase metal and a 6 conformation metal, a yang ming metal, where that center, where the yang ming contacts the center, which itself lies within the embrace of the water of Shaoyin, the imperial fire of Shaoyin, enlivening the embodied state. And this, when we understand in most articulately we see this expressed in the very structure of the formulas, in the very substances of the formulas, enacting those directions, enacting those connections. I was teaching over the weekend and I said, what do you think if I asked you, what's the most important herb in the Shanghan Lun? What would you say? And someone said, Guizhi. And I said, well, that's a great answer. And someone said, Fuzi. And I said, well, that's an even better answer. But I think the answer is actually Gansao, the one that we don't see, because Gansao is in 70% of the formulas. It's like hidden within the formulas, just like the tie-in chapter with its few narrow lines also expresses that same structure, that presence of the whole, the centeredness, which is itself constructed out of all of the connections that we have. My other phrase I always like to throw in when I'm teaching a new group is everything's everything all the time. Heiner mentioned that. there's no aspect of ourself when we're giving a formula, when we're digesting a formula, there's no aspect of our system that's not involved in that. And that's also the beauty of that's also the incredible architecture of the goo formulas as well, because they have that nature that sees so many different processes happening simultaneously and lights upon each one of them. And it's at the point of that sort of pointillist depiction of the whole that emerges within the structure of the physicality and materiality, the taste of those herbs that gives rise to the direction, which gives rise to the emergence of time expressing itself through the physical, through space. All that's happening over and over again. And it's actually the miracle of what's happening every time we take in some substance from outside of ourselves and make it into ourselves.
Perfect. That's perfect, Brandt. You know, the notion that Lorie brought forward about radicality is present in those plants, in the radix, in the roots, and that the very roots of our being are tied into that. And I share the sentiment about Gonzalo as well, but particularly as its systemic effect is pretty profound. But the movement of the plant up and out, as you described, through the xylem and phloem, through the circulatory system of the plant, affecting at the level of barks, oftentimes those agents which are regulating qi and allowing a greater freedom of movement up and down within the systems, and then all the way out to the twigs, which are reaching out, and the respiratory system of the tree, which is the leaves, right? This astounding level of coherence that's sustained between us and the plant world. And then as the fruiting bodies engender the potential for recreation and begin the descent. And so the entirety of the morphology of the plant is present within the context of the pulse as it rises from the deep depths of the Shaoyin and up through the Shaoyang and into the Taiyang and descending then on the right side to return to source at a cosmic level of fire within the Shaoyang, within the triple burner and pericardium axis, this level of cosmic fire and water, which are engaged in the return of source of the individual, that the entire story of that evolutionary experience is contained within the morphology of those plants as they're present, from sprouting basis, also that temporal basis of engagement with the environment of the plants has a similarity. So it's not just a morphological or structural basis, but it's also a temporal basis, which is that isomorphism that takes place between Chinese medicine, but also all medicines, which must have a location and a process and a degree of intensity by which the construction of the experience of the individual is made in such a way that some kind of difference can be made. Or as Gregory Bateson says, the difference which will make a difference. That is our goal oftentimes is to be able to have a perception of where that's located and within the complexities of the multiple universes this individual before us brings to the room.
Alexander, you mentioned the concept of virtue. I think that's a great way to sum up the uniqueness of the medicine and the human being within it. And captures also what Lonny brought up there. This is a predicament at the time, this kind of constant being pulled back instinctively into our own individual suffering, and then narcissistically kind of spinning with that, when and the let's put it this way, the for me, it's always been a predicament why the holomap that describes nature has 4 earth in it and 2 of every other element. And earth has something to do with transformation. It also has something to do with the material world and the animal instincts, which are inherently selfish. An animal will always run and defend its food source, etc. The human being, interestingly, when we have the same holomap and we have 4 fires and only 2 earth, and so that is sort of that expansion that somehow came into the cosmology of the Han Dynasty 2,000 plus years ago, that emphasized the importance of the human heart. The dictionary of that time even says, Xin Ren Xin Yi, the heart. That's not the animal pump, that's the human heart. And it is precisely what it's for. It's this virtue instrument that is supposed to make that free choice that we have. Over here is the density of the animal body that wants us to be descending into narcissistic spinning. And there is this surrendering of that that we are capable of, and that we sometimes need to be cultivating. And so that is, in a certain way, that's what virtue is, right? Which is the Chinese term is De. Here's the path, Dao, but there needs to be the De, which is this constant choice to walk on that path, that where we surrendering our selfishness and are there to live for others. If we are on the cosmological map, the heart is sitting at the climax of the year at the summer solstice, when all of matter has been created, and now everything is, now that life is abundant, the mockingbird is eating the praying mantis, and the praying mantis is eating the cicada, etc. Life is this amazing ritualistic sacrificial temple where on one side the beauty of the material world is being celebrated, but on the other hand also where there's death and suffering, but that is everything in nature. In that symbolic way of portrayal is sacrificing itself for something else. And then all of a sudden, when that happens, a whole new window opens up where the entire meaning of existence becomes something different. Even in something simple, like the example that comes to mind is my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Liu Hong, who wrote that book, Classical Chinese Medicine, who always is super strict with his students and shouldn't be selfish, and the Buddhist this and that, you need to think about others. But when he had a hangnail and it got infected and his wife said we need to pull that out, it was like 3 hours back and forth, where he's like, when she came close, he would go like, no, don't touch that, I'm afraid. It's like, and so he was like, what would my teacher say? Would say, like, just make it a sacrifice. This is you surrendering your fear and your pain. This is actually, that nail gets pulled. It's not for you, it's for the benefit of the world. Then when he arrived at that place, she pulled that nail. He didn't even feel it or so. So life in a certain, and the heart is our instrument to kind of move in that direction. That's why as humans, we all heart, but it's not for the celebration of our own, I want this, I need that. It's about this sacrificing and fathoming our life as being something that is meaningful for the whole world, everything we do in that butterfly way, that Will mentioned earlier. Those were just some thoughts that were triggered by your wonderful description of virtue. It's also interesting that the small intestine, which is the full organ, the government of the heart in a certain way, the last point is called Tinggong, which the word Ting, the palace of listening, is the palace of virtue. You know, what would the universe do? What are we supposed to listen to is what would the universe do, which is always what's best for everyone else, what's best for the world, not what's best for your limited, small existence there.
I love that you emphasized surrender as that power, that very power of the strength of the open heart and the human heart is surrender. And the power that comes from that surrender into the miraculous, into the great reality that we are, I think is necessary right now to be able to stand up to the systems that just don't work any longer. Like everything that we're talking about is just this miraculous arising of this power that we all need. Every single one of us needs it to recognize and to stand up to the systems that are failing right now. And this one isn't, and it never will.
It is not. It is not failing. In fact, it is within itself flourishing, and through its dissemination and its capacity to be disseminated into new cultures and new environments, its actual potency is enhanced. And I want to just come back, Heiner, to the character for day when you spoke it, and you came to the listening part of virtue, but I was also very struck in the moment by the that there is an I of literal, I in the character, which for me, when you were speaking, came back to it is our capacity to see. And then the Neijing tells us it's only through the eyes of our hearts that we can actually see to the level that we're speaking of. So it's, of course, a listening, also the small intestine from that closeness to the heart, but also this seeing with the eyes of the heart, which for me comes back to this capacity to illuminate the body, to illuminate matter, to see that illumination, to restore the capacity to see this way, which for me really is the heart of the medicine. It's why I still am passionately in love with this medicine, because of its capacity to restore that kind of sight. And once we see like that, as you said, Lonnie, once that sight opens, we can no longer live from a selfish narcissism. It's impossible. Virtue then emerges from us. And just to come back to, the tools of the needle, and then Brandt and Will, as you both so beautifully described, the construction of a formula. But for me, the sort of central tool that I always come back to is the spirit of the point itself, the poetry, the language, and our capacity to actually go to those same places, even without the needle, even without the herb, but simply with the potency of the symbols that the medicine actually is constructed around. That it is, I think, for me, the breakthrough in my understanding came when I understood that the medicine rests on the archetypes, on the primary forms that are universal and outside of time. So that's its true endurance is that for me. And also is the bridge. Again, I keep coming back to this, but this is the bridge to this emergent consciousness that is moving through us. And again, Lonnie, as you said, that we engage with, that we are engaging with its birth, with its gestation, with its emergence. And I think that is why I can still hold steady with, even though it seems as if it's all falling apart, why are we in there doing this work with this one person or this other person bit by bit, is because for me at this point, I see that the real work is cultivating the consciousness.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. The quantity is no longer relevant. It's like it could be one person, it could be a billion.
Brandt, you gotta unmute, my friend.
In light of what you in light of what you're saying, we can you were speaking, the eyes of the heart, and it's curious to think in that context of the bladder channel, and starting at Jingming and ending at Zhi-Yin at the end of Yin, the termination of Yin, so to speak. But when we think about how that's reflected in the physicality, how the archetype, or let's say I prefer not to say archetype, but symbol is expressed through all of the semiotic potentials of the physical body. It's curious to think that here is where we see the meeting of the yin chao and the yang chao. And the yin chao and the yang chao, one thing that they govern is opening the eyes and closing the eyes. And the capacity to leap to the horizon with our vision, to see all the way beyond with our vision, to direct the vision. Likewise, another aspect of the yin chao and the yang chao is to direct the inner vision, the neiguan. There's a curiosity about the symbolism of the eye, and that is, isn't it the only structure in our body in which if someone gets close enough to us, they can actually see themselves reflected in it? It speaks, its very function, its very morphology is the expression of that quality of going beyond the self. And that is a question of, are we asleep or are we awake? Are our eyes closed or are our eyes open?
And it's also fed by small intestine 19 to bladder 1. And what I'm getting listening to everyone is that there really is an awakened and illumined intelligence that Chinese medicine has given us the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the capacity to listen to, and awaken to that living intelligence as our own selves, and implicate ourselves, our own virtue, our own integrity, our own choices, and take responsibility for that wholeness, that striving of the life force to express wholly through us. And that intelligence, I mean, I know that one of the things that I've learned through clinical practice is really how to sit and listen, and to discern where to listen from, a point of absolute care and interest. And through that, I've come to really recognize that the motive force behind the whole project is love, and that separation is pain. And more I see my Chinese medicine practice as diagnosing separation as pain, seeing the promoting chi flow as a metaphor for promoting communication as a metaphor for ceasing repression, for joining the consciousness to the unconscious, and for helping individuals to increasingly be able to embrace that larger motive that I'm listening from, to be able to find within themselves that potential already there, that free dimension that's already there. And often people will say, well, you know, I did the right thing and I apologized to this person, or I didn't eat this, or I exercised 7 times this week and I'm not feeling like I think I ought to. And you know, Aurobindo is very clear relative to virtue that if you live a virtuous life, the only thing you're guaranteed in the end is virtue. Not any specific outcome in this world, really, other than virtue. And one of the things that impresses me while I listen to everyone talk is the nuanced complexity of everybody's listening, speaking, the people's here are there, and you know, your and my evolved capacity to listen and be interested, to complexity from a nuanced place. And it's pretty clear to me as I look out in culture and we look in the world, ecological systems are failing as a metaphor for our failed economic, social, political, legal, military, academic systems. And who are the people with access to the complexity of view and the capacity to listen to and to see through this complexity, you know, to the mystery at the heart of the matter? And I feel that Chinese medicine now gives us a portal deeply into this kind of, minimally into a complex, nuanced systems thinking, and really even beyond that into a place where, as we talk, you know, we all have our perspectives and our different points of view, but here I'm aware increasingly the individual has dropped away and there's a discussion that we're all part of and we're all giving rise to. And even as I speak, I'm listening to it and I'm getting the message at the same time in a way that really is, as Heiner said, Ziran. I mean, nothing here is scripted except for the prompt, why Chinese medicine now? And then there's the spontaneous arising between us. And it really is in that kind of listening that, for me, to recognize that everyone knows what they need, and they're always, and I know that because they're always telling me exactly what they need. And that nature is telling us, that the Tao is telling us, everywhere we look are the answers that we need to persevere. And I'm just thankful, you know, for me, this medicine has been the way into that. And I think it's a rare thing.
There's so much. Oh, go ahead, Will.
Oh. Just along the lines of the listening, Heiner, you brought up the listening, and there's also been the seeing, these sensory apparitions of the whole. But for me, that listening moment emerges oftentimes when I'm aware of my places of not listening, and if I can admit of the non-listening in its path, then it becomes something that allows me to, at some moment, actually be in the listening.
Yeah, inviting also whoever's listening beyond us as a group, but those that are listening to this recording. What I'm sensing is this just wanting to create a recognition that you're also not separate from what it is that we're exploring here together. And it occurs to me that, you know, we've been using sensory language, and we have these 7 portals of the heart. These are the doorways through which the ineffable heart is able to have its connectivity, participate, be intimate with, be in relationship with the world. And to me, one of the beauties of this medicine, and it demands that in order to practice it, we have to develop our sensory capacities, not just to listen to the pulse, but to be able to listen to that subtlety that the small intestine is capable of listening to, that refinement, the voice inside of the voice, that again comes back to, 1, this intimacy with life, and 2, Lonny brought up this, he brought up love. That if I were to sit here without any of us having said a word tonight, and we recorded all of us presencing love with no language, nothing for the senses to hear or to see, how long would it take the listener to catch on? But if all we need to do is speak some language as a way to, a young articulation of an ineffability, to say we are here in love with you, all of that requires a sensory experience. So that something that is really impossible to put words to is all of a sudden happening together, and we're in co-participation. Us as the ones on the recording, and us as the rest of the cosmos listening, be it directly or through some flutter. All of a sudden, somewhere in Connecticut, someone just says, "Yes, I realized I'm alive," and I don't know how that happened.
I love what you just said, Alexander. Lately, I've been so immersed in the happiness of the fishes story. It's always been one of my favorite stories, but lately I've just been immersing myself in that story. And what you just said is like that. It's like the happiness of the fishes. It's like, how did Chuangzi know their happiness? And how could the listeners know the love that we 7 are swimming in this conversation? They will know it because that same love is in them. It is the root of Tao. It is all that love, that joyfulness, that generosity, all those virtues are right there. And it's simply, you know, what Chuangzi said is, I know the happiness of the fishes simply by looking at them. They're swimming in the river. So I think what you said is, even if we were to say nothing, the love that we are expressing for the medicine, but also for this this kind of amazing field that is generated here, is available to everyone who listens, and even those who don't, as Will, you said.
Yeah, that the unitive eye of the heart that sees into the realm of the subtle and the invisible, yet commands everything. Like, that's what we're doing.
And as others have said, but why Chinese medicine now? Because somehow somehow the sages who wove the sort of foundational rubric of this medicine were in touch enough with the integral, with this wholeness, with this luminous wisdom, that it is still there. And as we practice, and if we devote ourselves to the practice of the medicine, it begins to move through us. And what a privilege it is.
They move through us.
Yes. Oh, that's so good, Brandt. Right. They move through us. That's right. We become them.
Well, because it's a continuity. I think in some place, there isn't a they, nor is there an us, but there's an unfolding, continuous stream, a process. And this too, I think, is something that is so relevant in Chinese medicine, is that it invites the Western-minded, noun-oriented being structure of this over here and that over there into a continuity stream, where in continuity, one of the effects of continuity is that it can only exist in the context of wholeness, because everything is flowing into everything else. And so I think that it's another way of holding it, that all of us, the listeners, the speakers, everything is part of a continuity stream. We are each other becoming.
Continuity is the enacting of the whole.
And that's the fire. That's the pure yang. That's the essence of our ability to burn away the dross of the alchemical process of this becoming that's under discussion here.
And yeah, that's the language that Teilhard de Chardin brought into the Mass on the World, precisely. Burn away the dross in me, that alchemical quality. And the same impulse comes up in Eliot when he says the fire and the rose are one. And that when we've discovered love, we will have discovered fire anew. That's Chardin again.
Beautiful.
And that continuity that's enacting itself, that's spontaneously, sympoetically enacting the whole through that rediscovery and reignition of fire, which is emerging constantly as if it's a seed struck by lightning, is a true description of what Chinese medicine itself is. And for that lightning to strike through the dark, and for those who see it to see it as if it strikes through the clouds and shows the immensity and ultimate ineffability of the whole. That's the only way through.
Yeah, I'm just struck with this image of spirit playing hide and go seek with itself. And, the acupuncturist is consciousness and the patient is consciousness, and placing that needle in, it's like, there you are, there I am. Creating that emergence, allowing for that emergence. Because what's speaking is what's listening. And what's treating is being treated. And I always try to impress on my patients that, this isn't you coming to me to do something. We're in this together. We're responsible to each other, and we're going somewhere together. Well, does anyone have anything else to say?
I'm just extremely grateful for the opportunity to participate in a dialogue such as this, where the listening is so deep. It's profound. It's a profound moment of experience in life. This kind of thing is a particularly rare moment, and possesses virtue, and I'm grateful.
I'm still some of the words that Brandt was speaking are still reverberating around this lightning, striking through the clouds and into the seed as what Chinese medicine is. And within that is precisely the placement of that needle. It's that lightning sort of straight through the clouds and into the seed of virtue to invite and awaken that enlightening process inside the self. And I don't mean the self of the client, but the self that is shared by all of us. There's that mutual awakening process where the seed gets to be born again and again, so it can continue to not just be a seed, not just be a set of seeds that are being held captive in the dark, where all we see are clouds and we lose the sunshine, but rather the seeds themselves, they're brought to life, and then that sprouts through the heart of humanity. And so I just wanted to bring that in, because I felt like there was something around this, the heart of Chinese medicine living inside that moment of contact, when the needle is placed with a point, that I just wanted to bring to light. And I'll just say, I too am so grateful that we could have a conversation such as this. Very rare indeed.
Oh, yeah. I'm always so grateful after these gatherings. My heart is so open. It has a particular feel to it that's so rare. It feels like I'm being treated, and all of life is being treated. Life is treating life. It just this emergence that happens is really powerful. So I hope those that are listening can feel it and experience it as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm called to say, just coming back around to this, what our prompt, the one sort of structuring piece that we had, why Chinese medicine now? And I keep remembering the moment, I don't know how long ago, when I sort of decided to leave behind this period of my life in my early 20s of militant environmental activism and kind of my rage and my intense persistence that we could change things from external action. And I did a weekend with Joanna Macy, who I think most people know, her amazing contribution to eco-psychology and finding some way to be able to persist in hope despite what's happening in the world. And she said, all that outer action is really important, and politics certainly still matters. This was probably 30 years ago that I heard her speak, and she said, but nothing will change on this planet without a shift in consciousness. And it was through those words, I think, in a way that I feel like she actually gave me permission, or I heard it as permission, to leave behind some of the intense anger and pushing and really driving myself into states of pathology, which I was doing, and find a different way make a difference. And so I feel so, so grateful to be here with you all, and then to think of this conversation as kind of milkweed seeds going out into our medicine and all the incredible practitioners out there to continue the work of shifting at that level. The lightning that strikes the seed.
What carries those milkweed seeds is the wind.
Yeah.
And we're so quick in modern Chinese medicine to malign the wind. In the earliest strata, the wind means life, and Chinese medicine is in the life. Yeah. Dr. Shen said Chinese medicine is in the life. The wind, that thing that seems to be the problem, may be the thing that is the carrier of the seed. And that seed, that wind, is the erotic life of the plant. It's the longing to persevere and to go on and to find the place where that surrender is ultimately possible. When it actually falls down again from the pregnant wind into the loam of the earth again. And let's not forget that sharp, bright light of the lightning, but also that rich, dark, soft bed of the loam. That physicality, the immanence that we need to find the connection to.
Beautiful.
I think that's so important. And to share this as if we were sharing sustenance with one another through our speech, that's the thing I'm most grateful for.
Heiner, do you have anything you'd like to say as we draw to conclusion?
And nothing that could be more meaningful than what my dear friends and colleagues just said. It's just beautiful to get together on a regular basis and speak about things that matter to all of us from a place that's not just from the head, but from the heart, and then emerge from that in a different way. Like Randine mentioned something, it feels like you had a treatment. So that's the goal of every good conversation. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity as well, and love you all, and I love getting together once a month.
Oh, beautiful. It's as always, it's been beautiful for all of us to be together. And it's wonderful that Alexandra brought in the whole community that will be listening to and watching this, because we're all in this together. And we all know here that we're in an incredible profession filled with people deeply in love with this medicine, giving everything they have to it, and having their lives enriched by it, and bringing the gift of this medicine out to individuals in the treatment room who are portals to consciousness, who are co-creating culture with us. And it's our intention to do a video like this, release a discussion like this once a month for a while, and after a little while we'll start just inviting the profession to it, so people can we can do Q&A, people can come on and have discussions, and we'll just see where it grows from there. Try to really get, just all wake up together, create this medicine together. And as each person talks, I think we all have the experience here of feeling cobwebs dusted away and portals opening, and just sort of an awe in terms of the depth of insight that and connection that each of us do have to this same one thing, where there is no separation. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to the collective listening to this, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And I'm just going to pause record here.